Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen, and this is a special episode. If you have not listened to the Amateur Traveler, and this is your first episode, I suggest you skip this one, because we're going to be talking about some of the Amateur Traveler history, and you might want to actually listen to one of the shows first. Also, to be honest, I'm recording this with a different sound setup, and I don't think it's going to sound as good, and I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I'm doing this special episode for two reasons. One is I am traveling this week and unable to put the time in to put together the regular episode. The next regular episode will be next week, and we'll cover California's Napa Valley and the wine region of California. The other reason I'm doing this special episode is that before that episode, the Amateur Traveler will turn 4. So this is the 4-year anniversary retrospective of the Amateur Traveler, something that I haven't done the last 3 years, but this seemed like a good time to do it, and in part this seemed like a good time to do it because I woke up this morning in Cozumel at the 9th floor of the Park Royal Hotel overlooking the beach, the cruise ships, and the jungle that is Cozumel, and it's the Amateur Traveler show that brought me here. Because, as I mentioned recently, the Park Royal Hotel, or the Royal Holiday Company, has brought me down here to review this hotel, and they paid my way down here, which I was very glad that people supported me doing that. But the Amateur Traveler has taken me places, quite literally, that I wasn't expecting when we started the show 4 years ago. I've often gotten the question, I don't actually remember whether I've ever answered it on the show, possibly in episode 1. Why did I do the Amateur Traveler? Why did I start podcasting? And why particularly a travel show? One of the big reasons that I started podcasting is I am a podcast junkie. I basically subscribe to, I think right now the count is 60 podcasts that I listen to as they come out. Some are not as regular as others. I used to listen to as many as 100, and now with a new feature on the iPhone, which I use to listen to, that lets me listen to them at twice the speed, I suspect my number of podcasts that I listen to may go back up again. And so it was something that I enjoyed. I think it's a wonderful media, and I wanted to do something in that media. I thought about doing a show about technology. I was listening to the Mac cast at the time, I still do, and thought maybe I should do a show like that, but Adam Christensen, not to be confused with Chris Christensen, seemed to be doing a pretty good job of that, so I didn't think that that was necessarily a niche that needed filling. I thought about doing a religious show, and actually I do a show now called the Bible Study Podcast, and have done that for quite a few episodes also. And then I had some friends over around Memorial Day 4 years ago, and we started telling stories, and all the best stories were travel stories. And that is really what became the impetus to start the Amateur Traveler, is that it is still my belief that a lot of the best stories that people tell are from when they went someplace else and they learned about a culture that was different from theirs, whether that culture be Chicago or that culture be Tonga when they went swimming with whales. And the Amateur Traveler usually, as you know, falls somewhere in between those two. If I can manage it from my internet connection here, at the end of this special episode, I'm going to replay an early episode of the Amateur Traveler to give you some idea of what has changed and what is the same. Obviously, it will not start with a theme song because that did not come up until I had a relationship with Podshow, later Mevio, that paid for Jeff Smith to write the theme song for the Amateur Traveler. People have asked numerous occasions, what is that song and what's the name of it? The name of it is the theme song for the Amateur Traveler. It was written specially for the show. Jeff wrote half the lyrics and I wrote the other half, and he came up with all the music and performs it. The other thing that I think the third episode is the one that I'm going to play, which is an episode called Bad Hotels, which seemed like a really good counterpoint to staying in a really nice hotel. I said hotel. It's really a resort that I'm staying in down here, an all-inclusive resort. But the show that I will play is typical of some of the early shows because it is just me talking. The Amateur Traveler did not start out as an interview show. I had in mind that I was going to run out of travel stories and I was going to need to start to interview people, but I didn't know anything about interviewing and I didn't know how to line people up, and I couldn't ask the listeners so much because there weren't any when we started. And I remember when the show first got a few hundred listeners, what a wonderful thing that seemed like, that a couple hundred people were listening. And nowadays, in all of the podcasts that I have in a typical month, I'll get somewhere like 90,000 to 100,000 downloads. So we've come a little ways from that, and obviously those are the sorts of things that led to me both doing this trip, where someone actually cares about my opinion, as well as another trip that I'm just announcing now, which is when I get back, I'm doing a 12-day trip for Nokia, where I'm going to talk about things you can do with a new mobile phone for them, and I got invited to that also because of this experience. Amateur Traveler is not my day job, as most of you know. Actually, my day job is I build online communities for a company called LiveWorld, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Engineering and Operations for that. And we run a number of online communities like HBO, A&E, History Channel, Biography Channel, the NBA. We run things for Johnson & Johnson, Mini Cooper, etc. So all of the Amateur Traveler work that I do is done in my copious free time. And it gets to be a fair amount of work, and one of the reasons that I've continued to do it is the support and encouragement from all of you. So I really do want to acknowledge that this 4th anniversary show is only possible because of you, not only because of your support, but also so many of you now have been on the show. So many of the guests have either been listeners or have been people that have been recommended by you, the listeners. And that has been the most wonderful part of the show, and getting to know some of you has been just a great joy for me. And so I really didn't want to let this anniversary pass by without thanking you for all your support. I am still hoping to do some meetups. I'm going to be in Chicago now twice, for instance, here in July, and New York City in July. I was talking about doing a meetup in December, but I'm actually going to be in New York sooner. When I know that schedule for the Nokia tour, I'll try and get that out. The best way to find information in a timely fashion is still to either follow me on Twitter or to join the mailing list, because I use the mailing list for those sort of things that I know that a lot of you are not necessarily up to date in your Amateur Travelers. Some of you will take this shorter episode as a opportunity to catch up a little, and that's fine. So when I am trying to get information out more quickly, I do use those two mechanisms to get information out quickly, because I know if I put things in the show, people may not hear it for months. And that's most of what I wanted to say in this episode before getting into replaying an older episode called Bad Hotels, as I said. I'm planning on continuing doing the show. I've done 4 years, and my plan, at least for now, is to do at least a 5th year. But we'll see how that works out. There are only so many hours in the day, and some weeks it's quite a chore to get out the Amateur Traveler. Each episode takes me, just so you know, somewhere on the order of 8 hours. An hour to do the interview, about 3 to 4 hours to edit it, another couple hours to put in the pictures and links, about another hour to add in the news, and maybe another hour to put in all the rest and upload the show. So probably added up to more than 8 hours. So it's a commitment of time, and I do it because of your encouragement, and thank you so much for listening to the show. And now here is an episode from the archives. I believe it's episode 3, Bad Hotels. And one of the reasons I picked this episode is, you may remember that we talked about it last week on the show, as we had someone who wrote in and said, 1, why don't you do more theme shows like that show, Bad Hotels, that you did originally? And also, 2, what happened to the original shows? Where are the original 19 shows that are not on the feed? And I said that one of the reasons they weren't is I didn't think they were as good. Now you can judge for yourself.
Amateur Traveler Podcast, Episode 9.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Today on the show, we'll be talking about when things go wrong. In particular, today's show will focus on some of the worst hotel experiences I've ever had.
Please take a moment now to make sure that your seatbelt is fastened low and tight about your waist. To fasten the seatbelt, insert the metal tab into the buckle. To release, it's a pulley thing, not a pushy thing, like you're in a car, 'cause you're in an airplane. Hello.
Welcome to the show. Today is Saturday, September 17th. Before I get started in what I'm talking about today, I have some news. Most of it bad news today, and fitting with the title of this particular show, which is Bad Vacation. The first piece of news is for my listeners who are using iTunes, which is, according to the stats, I've got the majority of you. If you had trouble getting episode 8, some of you may have missed episode 8. There was a problem I had with the RSS feed. You'll just need to go into iTunes, unsubscribe to the podcast, and resubscribe, and episode 8 and should show up. This is episode 9. You may have noticed that 2 additional airlines filed for bankruptcy this week. Both Delta Airlines and Northwest have filed for bankruptcy. I have links to the story in the show notes in case you missed that. I also have a link to a article on smarttraveler.com, and this is more of a question for if you happen to be someone who's flown on both Delta and or Northwest and you have frequent flyer miles. What can you do now with your frequent flyer miles, and how do you protect the investment of the time that you've put into earning those miles? So take a look at that article. It's from smartertravel.com, as I said. Also in the news is one piece of good news, actually. The federal bankruptcy judge has okayed U.S. Airways Chapter 11 plan, and that would be the plan then that would bring them out of bankruptcy, that would restructure some of their debts so that they could return to whatever amounts to normal operations these days. This is not the first time that airline has come out of bankruptcy recently, as I recall, and has gone back in because of things like rising costs of fuel and all the other problems that the airlines are dealing with. One interesting piece of news that would have to fall in both the good news, bad news categories. It's both a heartwarming story and possibly a travel nightmare for some other people. Carnival has has leased some of their large ocean-going hotels that we call cruise ships to FEMA to house some of the residents that were affected by Hurricane Katrina, which seems like a great thing. Carnival, great going. They have made them available to FEMA to house people so that they would have a place to stay. Obviously, one of the nicer places to stay, I would think. The problem that other people are running into is the people who had booked vacations for this time obviously are having their vacations canceled. But the complaint that's coming from customers is that as they rebook their trip, they're no longer being given the same rates that they were given when they booked the original trip. And so in many cases, if not most cases, the trip, if they rebook it, will cost more money. So not quite as good news there in terms of how Carnival is handling that. On to the show. So one thing, when you do a show about bad vacations, one of the things I realized, and I realized it when I got a call from a friend, I'll go into a little more details then, is that some of our best travel stories, the ones that we laugh about now, came from some of our worst moments in travel. Now, I had to say, when I got a call from one of my best friends from high school, I got a call from Dr. Robert Michael Young, Mike Young, who I knew in high school, who's gone on to get his doctorate in computer science and expert systems. I was talking to him yesterday on Skype, which I've mentioned before, a computer-to-computer free voice application. He's in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, and we were just catching up. And he had just gotten back from a conference in Kos, an island in the Aegean, I believe, off the coast of Greece. And I said, "Oh, you just got back from Greece? Great. How did it go?" Anyway, that's not so good. It's like, well, why not? What went wrong? He said, well, the conference was good, but he was expecting to go to Greece and to have this foreign country experience of being in a foreign country. And he said everybody spoke English, first of all, at this resort they were staying at, that the conference was at. So he didn't really get that opportunity of trying to communicate to people in another language. And he was kind of looking forward to that. Okay, well. And then he really only saw the resort. He didn't really get to see anything other than that, any of the island or any of Greece. And he said that the resort itself was not that great. The beds were bad, the food was only buffets, and it was bad buffet food. So it was one of those not particularly good experiences, and it took him 23 hours to fly home because of 4-hour layover in Athens and a 3-hour layover in JFK and sitting on the tarmac then in JFK as the planes get delayed and such. So that just reminded me of bad vacations. And I have to say that when my wife Joan and I were thinking about bad vacations, I don't think there's any vacation in particular that we think of, gee, that was totally a bad vacation. But there have been many, many moments that were bad vacation moments that certainly threatened to ruin the trip if we hadn't kept our sense of humor. And some of them are just little things. And as I started writing down last night all of the things that had gone wrong on all of our trips, it quickly became obvious that this was not a single show. This is probably a theme we'll get back to. I'm thinking of a advertisement for the show, a promo for the Amateur Traveler podcast, something like Amateur Traveler podcast, learn to travel smarter, learn to travel better, or just come and whine about it. But some of the things that have gone wrong, I've categorized them. I thought today I'd talk about bad hotel experiences. And there's so many different ways that a hotel can go that can have a bad experience. And sometimes it's just something very simple, like we stayed in a hotel in France on our first trip to Europe in southern France on the Rue de Vannes, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the town right now, and I wouldn't recommend the hotel anyway. And we walked into the room, and the room was just reeked of cigarette smoke. And my wife and I don't smoke, but we can usually deal with some amount of it. But this hotel room we could barely stand to be in unless the windows were open. So it was the only room they had, and it was not a particularly great night. The next night, we stayed in a hotel in Füssen, Germany, which is near Mad Ludwig's Bavarian castle that you've seen in all of the ads for southern Germany. It's this fairy tale castle upon which the castle in Disneyland is modeled. So it's a beautiful castle, Neuschwanstein, right near his old castle of Hohenschwangau, for those of you who are keeping score. And we stayed in a I want to say guest house, but it really is a small inn, Hotel Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was a large, imposing woman, and she sort of ordered people around a bit. And my wife and I had just a lovely night there. The room was very clean. The beds were great. There was a down comforter on the beds and such. But the two friends we were staying with, Chris and Doug, were just afraid that she sort of struck them as an axe murderer, and I think that the thought had gotten planted before the night, and so as they were sleeping in the room, they kept having one eye open for Elizabeth to come and get them. So sometimes a bad hotel experience can be just sort of normal. Sometimes it can just be a hotel not living up to your expectations. So my wife and I and her mother, several years back, before we had children, went up to the Expo, the World Exposition in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And there were 300,000 people a day at the Expo, as I recall. The theme of the Expo was a world in motion, or as we said, a world in motion, a wait in line. So a lot of people to deal with. And so Vancouver all of the regular hotels were filled up, and a lot of the smaller hotels that don't normally get a lot of business were getting a lot of additional business. And the good thing was that they were taking some of this money that they were getting, and some of the hotels were sprucing themselves up a bit. So we were staying in this hotel in Chinatown in Vancouver, which is a little dicey, but it wasn't too bad a neighborhood, and a little further out than usual. And it was a small hotel. It was one of those hotels that I think the bathrooms used to be down the hall, and they had managed to leverage in a small bathroom into the hotel room. But it was a very small room. It's one of these rooms where you could sit on the double bed, and it's up against two walls, and you could easily sit on the bed and put your feet on either of the other two walls. There's literally 12 to 18 inches around this bed in this room. This room is basically a bed. There's a TV in the room, but it's actually up on a shelf above the bed because there is no room even for a chair. And the funny thing about this hotel was that every day we came in, something was different. So the first day we came in, there was the elevator was green paint with markings on it, and we came back later and there was paneling, or faux paneling at least. And one day we would come in and there would be a new hanger in the room, or a place to hang something up, because there would be no closet in this room. It was a very small hotel room. And another day we'd come in and the lobby had redone. So it got to be just funny in terms of, well, I wonder what they're going to change at the hotel tonight. And so sometimes these bad hotel experiences just get to be some of your better stories, and you look back on them and you just laugh at this funny situation. We stayed at a small hotel room also in Paris when we were there, near the Opera. And it again was one of these rooms where there was no plumbing in the room, I'm sure, when the hotel was built. And 10, 20 years ago, you would have gone down the hall to the bathroom. But a lot of those hotels in Europe have added small bathrooms into the room. Now, but this hotel room added a shower, which is great. The shower was, I think, about 18 inches wide. Now, I am also in the shoulders about 18 inches wide, so I sort of fit in the shower. The shower was also at least a foot to a foot and a half, at least 12 to 18 inches off the ground, because they didn't have room for the plumbing, and so some of the plumbing was underneath the shower itself. And so you sort of stepped up into this very, very cramped shower, and I couldn't help thinking, if I drop the soap, I can't even bend down to get it. I mean, this is how small this thing is. I actually did drop the soap and managed somehow to squeeze myself down, but I had to think that if somebody was watching, it would have looked like one of those magic tricks of Houdini trying to get out of the glass case or something. So, and again, it was a fine hotel. It was a comfortable stay. It was a good price. But we opened up the bathroom and we just laughed. It just was not what we were expecting. Another hotel that we stayed at that would categorize in one of those, not what we're expecting, although maybe in this case it should have been what we were expecting. We went to the Jersey Shore. We had some friends from college, Mark and Leisha, who we had gone several summers either to their place to see them or they had come to our place to see us. And after a while, we enjoyed seeing them, but we're thinking, we've seen your place. They live in upstate New York, near Albany. And you've seen our place. Let's go someplace else. Let's vacation together. We'll still be taking the same amount of time, but at least we'll see something different. So when we flew back to the East Coast, instead of going upstate to upstate New York, we went to the Jersey Shore. One nice thing about the Jersey Shore, if you're from Northern California as I am, the water near where we live, between just south of San Francisco, so near Santa Cruz, is always very cold. It's 55 degrees or something in the ocean. So we looked forward to being able to swim in the ocean. So we went to the Jersey Shore, and we stayed at this hotel that had looked nice from the description of it. It was a suite, and it was the Starlight Motor Inn. And we opened up the door to it, and their definition of a suite turned out to be a large room, much larger than the hotel room I was talking about earlier. But it just basically was a large room with a folded divider in the middle, so you could close it off a particular space. And it had, I think it was supposed to have a full kitchen, but a full kitchen turned out, as I recall, not to include a stove or an oven. It was missing something fairly significant. I think it was the stove it was missing. I think it had an oven and we made pizza. But it was, it was a nice enough hotel. It had a pool, had a lot of guys wearing gold chains and calling each other Vinny. Hey, Vinny! But it was just a funny experience, and it was a little less than we expected. And my wife, having grown up on Long Island, it was a little bit of a blast from the past, being around the kind of people who she'd grown up with and such. And later on, our friend Alicia had picked up a postcard from the hotel, and she sent us a postcard from the hotel. And one of the things it said on the postcard was free in-room coffee. And she wrote at the bottom, I didn't get coffee. Did you guys get coffee? But it was just, looking back at it, we just laughed. It was just a funny experience. It wasn't the nicest hotel we've ever stayed in, but we took it with a sense of humor. We look back at it and just have to laugh at it. Now, sometimes you have those experiences which are a little less laughable, and probably are three of our worst hotel experiences in no particular order would be our most recent trip to Hawaii. We arrived in the Big Island of Hawaii, and on the west shore, not near Hilo, but near the resort areas. And we arrived at our hotel, have all our luggage with us, and they say, you don't have a room. Why, we have a reservation. We made a reservation. What are you talking about? Well, it never got confirmed. Well, we knew that our friend Dave, who was traveling with us, had confirmed it within 15 minutes after we had made the original reservation. We'd actually made the reservation and very quickly checked with our traveling companions, Susan and Dave, to figure out if they could do it and if all those dates worked and such. And then we had paid them money, called them up. They had no record of that. And Dave is actually in the sports business, and he works in the ticket office. And I was very impressed that he kept his calm the whole time. And they're saying they have no other rooms. There are no rooms at all. And he's just very assertive, but very, very calm. And he's, asked to speak to the manager, and when the manager was gone, could, get him on the cell phone and such. And they actually managed to, at some point, look up the records. They actually had records that he had called. We said he'd called on this date, and given his credit card number. And they didn't have any record that he'd given the credit card number, but they were actually able to figure out that he had called. And they were pretty sure at that point they knew what had happened. They had screwed up. But they're still saying they have no rooms. And he's very calm, and he's very assertive, and, basically worked his way up from the desk clerk to the manager, and at some point the manager said, "Oh yeah, we've got a place for you to stay." And it was sort of an eye-opening experience for me, is that sometimes no means, well, not exactly no. That there might be some other room if you are assertive, and I think also assertive and yet not rude. And so we managed to have a place to stay, and it did work out. But there's moments there where we're thinking, okay, we're in Hawaii, and we're sleeping in the rental car. We've had other experiences where you get the hotel room and you wish you hadn't. Probably one of the worst nights we had in a hotel was followed by one of the best. One of our best experiences, the first time we went to Europe, we made no reservations ahead of time except I think the first hotel night, so that we knew we were there the first night. And we would just drive into town and we would find a hotel. And that included that very smoky hotel room in France. And it also included one night, one of the best finds we've ever had traveling. We were driving along the Autobahn, and our friend Chris Lampman said, "Oh look, this little town Fritzlar is marked as having a cathedral. Let's stop in Fritzlar." We'd never heard of Fritzlar. I don't even think we at that point were wise enough that we were traveling with our guidebooks out or whatever. It was a fairly unplanned adventure, that whole trip, and I don't travel quite the same way again. We hadn't brushed up on our German or even our French, I think, as we went before that trip. And so we went into Fritzlar, and Fritzlar is a storybook town. It's beautiful. We have a painting still in our house that we bought in Fritzlar of these wood-framed houses, where the houses get larger every story, where the third story is larger than the first story, so that it leans out a bit more. I don't know if you've seen that style of architecture, but usually that's because the house was taxed based on the square footage on the first floor. And so people would actually build the second floor larger and the third floor larger still. And it's this beautiful wood-framed houses. We ate in a restaurant that they spoke no English at all because this was off the tourist route, but it was a small restaurant. It was good food. It was a little more modern than the traditional German fare. It's just a wonderful, wonderful stay. But that night was followed by Chris and Doug, who we were traveling with, went off in a different direction. They had more time, so they went off to Berlin and Denmark and saw some things we didn't see, and we needed to get home. So my wife and I we had two rental cars at this point. We took the other rental car, and we drove back towards Holland, and we stopped, and I don't even remember the name of the town, but it was outside of Hanover in Germany. And we got this room, and it seemed fine. It was above a bar or a beer hall, but that didn't strike us as a problem until we found out that it was Pinksterfest. It was the festival of Pentecost, and at least in that one town, at least in that one drinking establishment, the way that Pinksterfest is celebrated in Germany is with lots of beer and lots of loud singing. Late into the night. I don't remember whether it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, where we were sitting there saying, are they ever going to stop? And we didn't know, we hadn't brushed up on our German, we didn't know enough German to even go down and say, can you be quiet? And we didn't know if we wanted to go down and talk to what were, at this point, seemingly to us, a large group of inebriated Germans. And so we just kind of laid there and stewed, and we thought, we're not going to pay for this hotel room. We're going to refuse to. In the morning, we're going to stomp out. And finally, a German woman who was also staying upstairs where we were shouted downstairs at 2 or 3 in the morning saying, whatever it was very effective, and then they calmed down. We were able to get to sleep. But we woke up and we were still mad. You can't believe how noisy it was and such, and we were going to go down and show them a piece of our mind. The only woman who was down there, or the only person who was down there, was an older woman who was just this sweet, frail little old lady who was offering us egg for breakfast, and we spoke almost no English, and again, we hadn't brushed up on our German. We just thought, well, she wasn't one of the people who was up till 2 or 3 in the morning, and we just paid the hotel room and left. But it still remains a memorable stay, although probably not as memorable, if you ask my kids, as one of our worst hotel experiences. And this one's closer to home. It was in Santa Rosa, California. We were seeing, going up to see our friend Chris. And I don't remember whether I told the story before, but I checked and I didn't seem to find it in the show notes or whatever. But he had put us up at a hotel. He lived in Santa Rosa, but he wanted to put us up in a nice hotel because he had rented out part of his house, so we weren't able to stay with him. And it's the first time that we weren't able to just stay with him because he had a roommate now. And so I think he felt kind of bad about it. So he put us up in the nicest hotel he could find. But what that meant was that we stayed up talking to him till 11 o'clock at night or so. And we had 2 small kids at the time. I don't remember how young they were, but they were pretty young, maybe 3 and 4, right around that age. And he said, well, follow me. I'll show you where the hotel is. And he drove out, and we drove past. There's a hotel practically 3 blocks from his house. I think the Pink Flamingo is the name of that hotel. And we drove past that, and we drove past all these other hotels, and we kept driving, and it seemed like a long, long drive, like half an hour, and it probably wasn't that long. And we drove up to what is a lovely hotel, and actually my wife and I have stayed there the last time we were in Santa Rosa. We stayed in this hotel, and we walked into the hotel about 11:30 at night and said, yeah, we're the Christensens. We have a hotel, we have a reservation. And they said, oh, sorry, we don't have a room. And we said, I don't understand. We have a reservation. In fact, we guaranteed late arrival. Well, I know, but we gave your room away. What do you mean you gave my room away? I told you it was coming. I guaranteed late arrival, but the room had been given up to someone else, and it was fairly clear that they didn't have another room. Well, at some point they said, well, we can offer you a room with a Murphy bed, 1 bed. And we said, well, we've got 2 kids. That really doesn't work at all. And so they said, well, it's our fault. We'll get you another hotel room. They comped us the room. They paid for the hotel room. They actually paid for the hotel room back at the Pink Flamingo, the one that we had driven past 30 minutes ago. So we got back in the car. We drove almost all the way back to his house. And, he said goodbye and drove just the 2 or 3 blocks to his house, which, we had been right near there. And we go in and we say, we're tired and okay, but they've got a hotel room. They called, no problem. Here's your key, and here's how to find it in the map. And we take the kids, and we take the luggage, and we walk through the parking lot, and we get to the hotel room. And this hotel was an odd hotel. It had an interior door and an exterior door. And we found out later, and we were actually opening the exterior door. And we open up the room. And there's 2 people sleeping there. There's an elderly couple that is sleeping in the room that they had just given us. And fortunately, I don't think they heard us, and we closed the door quickly. And very quickly, somebody ran from the front desk and said, I'm so sorry. We hadn't written down that we had given out 1 hotel room, and we realized it right after you left the front office, and we've been running after you to try and catch up with you, but didn't catch up with you in time. And my son, by this point, was just a little guy. Is just sobbing. We're never gonna find a place to stay tonight. So we did. It all worked out okay, and they did give us the hotel room for free. But it's a memorable experience. So those are some of our bad hotel experiences and the theme of bad vacation. I'd be interested in hearing what the experiences you've had were that you can laugh about now, or those you can't. As I move on to the portion of the show for internet resources, I only have 1 internet resource that I wanted to point you to this week because the show's a little longer, and that is a screencast. I'm not sure if you're aware of what a screencast is, but it is a movie which shows what's happening on somebody's screen while they narrate it. So it's like a visual podcast. And the one that I'm pointing you to on the show notes is about using smart playlists in iTunes to better manage your podcasts. And I found it to be useful, and I have switched to use this versus using the way iTunes manages podcasts by default. So take a look at that in the show notes. Or anything that I mentioned that's a link in the show notes is also available in the enhanced iTunes version, which would be the AAC version of the podcast. We still do have a contest going on. I'm still haven't got any entries, so I sort of have a contest going on. At the end of this month, whoever has sent me the best story about a surprise while traveling will still receive a free Amateur Traveler Podcast t-shirt, mug, or mouse pad, or one of the other items from my online store. There is a contest place in the discussion boards now. I'll link to from the show notes. Also, please feel free to go into the discussion boards and comment on this show, as well as send in your information for the upcoming episode on the first Amateur Traveler City Guide on San Francisco. What are the best places to see, best things to do, best places to shop, best things to eat, what's the best way to get around, what's the biggest surprise or funniest thing you saw. I have 3 more places that I've added to the discussion boards on the website. One is some polls. I'm interested in learning more about you and how it is that you use the podcast. The first 2 polls are where you listen to the podcast and when you listen to the podcast. I also have a new area on travel contests. So if you like dreaming about travel as I do, but you can't always afford it or you don't always have the time, I've put in 3 new contests where you can go and maybe you can win a chance for you and 10 of your friends to take a trip on Alaska Airlines, for instance. That's one of the 3 contests that's up there. Of course, if you wanted to take my wife and I as 2 of those 10, if you win, that would be okay. I also have added a new section in the discussion boards on travel deals, and I've put in some of the more interesting travel deals that I have seen recently. So the 3 that I have in there right now are 2-for-1 fares on Radisson Caribbean Cruises, a cruise with Carnival in Europe in 2006 for $62 a day. Anything less than $100 a day is usually a pretty good rate, so $62 is pretty good. And then a ridiculously cheap cruise in the Caribbean with Easy Cruise for $16 a night. I do have an article on Easy Cruise in my regular blog in the travel section, which I've linked to from the discussion board also, that tells you a little more about it. Easy Cruise is a very different kind of cruise line. You can tell from the big orange boats, it's targeted at a younger crowd. It is a la carte, so the $16 a night doesn't include a lot of things that would be included normally in a cruise, but check that out for the bargain basement cruiser experience. If you like the show, don't forget to tell your friends. Also, if you could go vote on Podcast Alley, that'd be great to get the ratings for the show to be higher. There is a link to the show notes also on the Gizmo Project. Gizmo Project, like Skype, is another application for doing free connection computer to computer, and I've started to use Gizmo Project for some interviews. I'm hoping to have an interview in next week's show about some couples I met on the discussion board who have done an around-the-world cruise. We're hoping to do that tonight, and we'll be using Gizmo Project for that, so check out the link for that. To wrap up the show, I already used the song earlier that I found on either GarageBand or Safe Music Network for Bad Hotel, so instead I'll be using a song by Rockwell Church called Bad Vacation. Thanks very much for listening. Here's Bad Vacation by Rockwell Church from GarageBand.com.
Wasn't pretty, it rained all the time, and the sights aren't all they're cracked up to be. I guess the breaking point came around the time when the post-up drove the fact right up into me. I had a lot of thoughts, a lot of deep thoughts, so deep I almost lost myself again. It was the 3rd time, but not the charm, and I almost lost my karma. Push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby, yeah. Push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby. 'Cause I just got back from a bad vacation. Just got back from a bad vacation. Just got from a bad vacation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. may be so, but they always say I've got somewhere to go. It's just a question of philosophy. It's a question of the things I'm supposed to be. You'll take the time to free yourself, and I'll take this time to tighten down my chains. I'm in the middle of a paradise, and I just can't stop the raining. So push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby, yeah. Push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby. 'Cause I just got back from a bad vacation. Just got back from a bad vacation. Just got back from a bad vacation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. These minutes are these hours away. They distract me from the things I want to say. The workaholic with the collarless jerk wants to play all night till his fingers hurt and bring the house down. Maybe just you. Well, there's really nothing else we'd rather do. Whoa, isn't there enough to go around? So push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby, yeah. Push me, work me, I wanna be everybody's baby. 'Cause I just got back from a bad vacation. Just got back from a bad vacation. Just got back from a bad vacation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just got back.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Goodbye now.